Lieutenant Frege thought that the Dallas PD would be extremely interested in the witness he had found. Yes, you would think so, wouldn't you? Honest people assume that everybody's honest. That's one of the troubles of this whole case, is that at this time, there were a lot of God-fearing, honest, hard-working, greatest generation types of people that had dedicated their lives for the good, that believed the best of others and had been taught to assume the best, to serve your fellow man, to believe what they say and take it at face value. But this entire incident proved that foolish in a way that America has never recovered from. We've never recovered our trust in government. Our cynicism is through the roof. Our country has been changed, but Lieutenant Frege thought, yeah, Dallas PD will be interested. They told him in no uncertain terms they were not interested. Frege then thought that the Warren Commission would be interested. They too were not. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess Cannell, and if you're new, then welcome. I would love to earn your subscription. Today we're going to be talking about Rose Cheramie. We did a video about Rose Cheramie's story a couple weeks ago, and you guys really loved that. And I was just looking this morning and thinking, what are we going to do? Which I haven't ever been in that position before. Normally I have it planned, but I noticed that I have Richard Belzer's book Hit List, and in there we get a chapter on Rose Cheramie. So that is what we're going to be doing today. First, I want to shout out a very amazing comment that I received. It is from Miss Diane McGill, who has been leaving comments for a while, but at some point she started meeting, I believe, with just one friend, and it has gone from there. So this is her comment in response to the most recent video I released, and I just had to share it with you guys because it's too fun. And for me, I don't know, I think maybe we need to come up with like an open inquiry award or something, because this is the kind of attitude that I want to have in my own spirit and that I want to foster here on this channel. It is one of thinking and engaging and taking hold of the facts and making them our own. Here is Diane's comment. The Jess's class is now meeting twice a week. She doesn't say so here, but I believe it's grown to 4 or 5 ladies. I wish you could have seen us old ladies with water guns shooting at each other, trying to figure out the position of the gun and then bending and twisting to find the place on our necks to show each other where the bullets hit. We have 4 books the 4 of us are sharing and are all so enjoying these videos. Thank you, your students in Oregon, Jess. So very, very precious, I will say. Like, I love everything about this comment. I immediately screenshotted it and sent it to my husband and daughter. Like, I cannot believe this is too fun. But I just want to say too that like this is the spirit of inquiry that I think we should all have. We should all be using whatever resources we have available to us. If you can purchase good books, purchase them. I've recommended Robert Groden's book here a lot because it is just the best. It is full of photography, full of things that help you lay hold of the facts. But if you don't have that, YouTube is full. If you need to do it for free, YouTube is full of videos that we can learn from. And also we do have our physical bodies. So this that we are going to read today is from Richard Belzer's and David Wayne's book, Hit List, an in-depth investigation into the mysterious deaths of witnesses to the JFK assassination. Now, something interesting that I realized the minute I opened it up, chapter 1 is J.D. Tippit. Chapter 2 is Lee Harvey Oswald. So it is going in order, I believe, of the people who were taken out, people who had mysterious deaths. And this is the investigation into them. So very interesting. Here is chapter 5. It's called Melba Christine Marcades, September 4th, 1965. The victim, and it shows her here. It says the victim, Melba Christine Marcades, also known as Rose Cheramie. Cause of death, hit and run auto accident. Official verdict, accidental. Actual circumstances, Rose was part of a heroin smuggling ring in which she was forced to participate. They threatened to harm her child, whom they were holding until she finished performing as drug courier for the heroin network. It has been substantiated by multiple parties that she actually correctly predicted how, where, and when President Kennedy would be assassinated. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you want to go back to the previous episode about Rose Cheramie, because that gives critical information about the things she knew. We're going to go through some of it here, but for a much more detailed look at what she communicated days before the JFK assassination, you'll want to watch that video. Here are 3 inconsistencies that are identified. Number 1, although the victim died from a head wound after being run over by a car, she also had a large, round wound in her head, leading to speculation she may have been shot first and then run over to make the death appear as accidental. However, faced with very limited information at the scene or people of influential means, as we describe further in the material that follows, police ruled the death was apparently accidental. That is taken from a Gary Shaw article in '93. Everything is cited here at the bottom, so I'm not going to point out everything, but I just want you to know that I'm seeing all the citations for each point of fact or for each article that's being read. The second inconsistency listed is autopsy report disappeared. The third inconsistency is our additional research revealed that evidence of the gunshot wound was blatant. See below. And then we get into the text, which I'm just going to read for you. Like Jake Zangetti, Rose Cheramie was another clearly established case of a person possessing obvious foreknowledge of important events related to the JFK assassination. Her story was selected as the opening sequence for the film, JFK, and readers will likely remember its ominous overtones of conspiracy and intrigue. Some mornings I am just inundated with yawns, and this is one of those mornings, which means you guys get a video that has tons of cuts right at the beginning because I'm just yawning like crazy. Hopefully that will stop. I'm drinking my coffee. From the victim's standpoint, it's a sordid story. Rose was a dope runner associated with Jack Ruby and other mobsters. The mob guys held her child as insurance that she'd complete the work. I didn't realize that. We're learning more information here. I'm really glad to be reading this. She was a courier for the dope ring. She brought the money to pay for a large heroin shipment that was coming into the port of Galveston, Texas, in late 1963. She was to pick up the money from the man who was holding her child, pay for the drugs, and then take the heroin shipment. To be in that position is such a vulnerable position. Whatever you think about her choices, we don't know what got her there. Sometimes women get this way because they've been groomed into it by their very own families. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 bad choices, maybe a 1-year period of time when they've made some bad choices. Sometimes it's abandonment or abuse. But this is an incredibly vulnerable position to be in, for someone to have your child and be basically holding them hostage until you perform a drug run. En route to the transaction, an argument apparently broke out between her and the 2 men who were transporting her. They threw her out of the car, and she was run over by another car and then taken to a hospital where police were then called. Her story was then told to a Lieutenant Fruget of the Louisiana State Police. Lieutenant Fruget verified the story, learning that Rose was a courier for the drug and prostitution ring that was known to be operating out of the southeastern U.S. He was amazed to also find out that before throwing her out of the car, the 2 men had discussed a conspiracy plan to assassinate President Kennedy in Dallas. Now, here's the amazing part. This all took place on November 20th, 1963, 2 days before the assassination. As Lieutenant Fruget testified to a congressional committee, Rose's itinerary was to, quote, pick up some money, pick up her baby, and to kill Kennedy. That's what Lieutenant Fruget testified to the congressional committee, that her agenda was threefold: pick up some money, pick up her baby, and to kill Kennedy. That was the deposition of Francis Fruget before the House Select Committee on Assassination. So that was before the assassination of President Kennedy, and Lieutenant Fruget had dismissed it as the rambling talk of a drug user. 2 days later, when Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Lieutenant Frugier felt like he had been hit by a bolt of lightning. Frugier dismissed all this as the ranting of a drug user, but after Kennedy was killed, he went to the hospital to question her and also turn her over to the authorities. He later learned that she had also predicted at the hospital that the assassination was going to happen. Rose also told two men at the hospital, Doctors Weiss and Owen, that Ruby was involved in the Kennedy plot. And she told both Weiss and Frugier that she had seen Oswald at Ruby's club. So you understand, this woman not only predicted the assassination in advance, not only said she knew that Ruby was involved in the assassination plot, in the Kennedy plot, but that she had seen Oswald at Ruby's club. So she can link critical pieces of the story. It gets even weirder. At the hospital, Cheramie again predicted the assassination. On November 22nd, several nurses were watching television with Cheramie. According to these witnesses, during the telecast moments before Kennedy was shot, Rose Cheramie stated to them, "This is when it is going to happen." And at that moment, Kennedy was assassinated. The nurses in turn told others of Cheramie's prognostication. This is from a memo of Frank Meloche to Louis Ivan on May 22nd, 1967. Although the Dallas motorcade was not broadcast live on the major networks, the nurses were likely referring to the spot reports that circulated through local channels in the vicinity of the trip. Of course, the assassination itself was reported on by network television almost immediately after it happened. Furthermore, according to a psychiatrist there, Dr. Victor Weiss, Rose, quote, told him that she knew both Ruby and Oswald and had seen them sitting together on occasions at Ruby's club. On occasions. She knew Ruby and Oswald and had seen them sitting together on several occasions. In fact, Frugier later confirmed the fact that she had worked as a stripper for Ruby. This is from a Louisiana State Police report in 1967. It continues, "When she came out with the Kennedy business, I just said, wait a minute, something wrong here somewhere." That's from the deposition of Francis Frugier, again, before the HSCA. Assassination researcher James DiEugenio has documented the facts of this case conclusively. The word spread throughout the hospital that she had predicted Kennedy's murder in advance. Dr. Wayne Owen, who had been interning from LSU at the time, later told the Madison Capital Times that he and other interns were told of the plot in advance of the assassination. Amazingly, Cheramie even predicted the role of her former boss, Jack Ruby, because Owen was quoted as saying that one of the interns was told that one of the men involved in the plot was a man named Jack Rubenstein. Of course, Rubenstein went by Ruby. Owen said that they shrugged it off at the time, but when they learned that Rubenstein was Ruby, they grew quite concerned. "We were all assured that something would be done about it by the FBI or someone, yet we never heard anything." In fact, Cheramie's association with Ruby was also revealed to Dr. Weiss. In an interview with him after the assassination, Rose revealed that she had worked as a drug courier for Jack Ruby. How reliable a witness was Cheramie? Extremely. Frugier decided to have the drug deal aspect of her story checked out by the state troopers and U.S. Customs. The officers confirmed the name of the seaman on board the correct ship coming from Galveston. So she had a name and she had a ship, and officers confirmed that. The customs people checked the Rice Hotel, and the reservations had been made for her under an assumed name. The contact that had the money and her baby was checked, and his name showed that he was an underworld suspected narcotics dealer. Frugier checked Cheramie's baggage and found that one box had baby clothes and shoes inside. So as they're looking at her evidence that she's given, she gave the right name of the seaman and the ship. She gave the right information about a hotel that had been reserved under an assumed name that she knew about. The contact that she mentioned was, in fact, an underworld suspected drug narcotics dealer. And inside of her bag, she did have baby clothes. So These things all checked out. Lieutenant Frege thought that the Dallas PD would be extremely interested in the witness he had found. Yes, you would think so, wouldn't you? Honest people assume that everybody's honest. That's one of the troubles of this whole case, is that at this time, there were a lot of God-fearing, honest, hard-working, greatest generation types of people that had dedicated their lives for the good, that believed the best of others and had been taught by their Judeo-Christian parents to believe the best of others, to assume the best, to serve your fellow man, to believe what they say and take it at face value. But this entire incident proved that foolish in a way that America has never recovered from. We've never recovered our trust in government. Our cynicism is through the roof. Our country has been changed, but Lieutenant Frege thought, yeah, Dallas PD will be interested. They told him in no uncertain terms they were not interested. Frege then thought that the Warren Commission would be interested. They too were not. But when New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison mounted an authentic investigation a few years later, he found out about the story, hired Lieutenant Frege as an investigator, and sent him to find Rose Cheramie. However, she was now dead. She had been run over by a car on an extremely remote area of Highway 155 at around 2 o'clock in the morning, a mile and a half east of Big Sandy, Texas. It was reported that she had been hitchhiking on the road. It's important to understand even the nature of that incident, because as we read in the other book that we read about Rose Cheramie's life, the person who was doing the driving of the car believed that her body position and the way certain things were laid out in the road had been making it so that he couldn't help but hit her. So you want to go back and listen to that, because even that hit and run accident, I mean, the first one being thrown out of a car is also suspect, but this particular one had the evidence of the completely unrelated person who was basically put in a position where he couldn't help but hit Rose Cheramie in the road. District Attorney Garrison was so suspicious of the circumstances of her death that he attempted to have her body exhumed. That request was denied, somehow precluded by local authorities. Lieutenant Frege went to Texas and located the investigating officer. But in Frege's written summary of his interview with the investigating officer, one J.A. Andrews, Frege writes that although Moore attempted to avoid Cheramie, he ran over the top of her skull. After a rather cursory investigation, due to the reluctance of Cheramie's family to pursue it, Andrews reluctantly closed the probe as an accidental death. Yes, I mean, this is sort of like the Kennedy family, isn't it? That once you've already lost one beloved family member and you are pretty sure it's because of nefarious underworld somethings. There's something not good that was done, and now your family member has lost their life. Well, now you have paid the ultimate price. And so that the family would choose not to pursue it makes me think of the Kennedy family. My understanding is they did their own private internal investigation, but they never ever publicly gave a tip of the hand that they saw it as anything else other than the official story. I do know that Penn Jones, I have his books right there on my shelf. I did redo my shelf a little bit. These are all the books that we've covered on the channel, so I put those there rather than the books that we haven't done. Anyway, Penn Jones apparently spent a day going through the evidence that he had collected with Robert F. Kennedy. So that would be sometime in the first 5 years of the case. But we don't have any public record, I don't believe there is, of any Kennedy family member except for RFKJ in the recent years expressing disharmony between the official story and what the family thinks happened. But I say all that to say, yeah, once you've already lost a family member and maybe there's more vulnerable family members, there's, you don't want your whole family to be taken out. It feels a lot easier, and I'm sure in those moments of grief, to just say, don't worry about us. We'll quiet down. We'll never cause you any problems again. To very powerful people. Author Jim DiEugenio investigated the death of Rose Cheramie in detail and was left with many questions. We're given some of them here. Furthermore, there are oddities in the extant medical records at Gladewater Hospital. Moore states that Rose was still alive at the scene, so he drove her to Big Sandy and asked for the nearest doctor. The doctor gave her a few shots before the ambulance arrived to take her to Gladewater. On Cheramie's death certificate in 3 different places, she is listed as DOA, dead on arrival, yet also on this document we are informed that a period of 8 hours elapsed between the onset of injury and her death. This 8-hour time period would coincide with the time of death, which is listed at 11 a.m. So what happened at the hospital in the intervening hours? We also uncovered some virtually heretofore unknown evidence that is extremely relevant. Longtime JFK researcher and historian Walt Brown came up with this noteworthy addition. Rose Cheramie, on the other hand, is always listed as Big Sandy's, Texas. It is never taken far enough to state that she was found on the easement to the property of either Jerome Ragsdale or Paul Rothermel, whom I can never keep apart. Either way, she wasn't found in the street. Well, as it turns out, a key witness turning up dead very near the property of Paul Rothermel and otherwise in the middle of nowhere on a remote Texas highway is actually very noteworthy indeed. Oh, goodness, you guys. We're about to get a story here. Wow. Paul Rothermel was the security chief for billionaire H.L. Hunt, who has often been linked to the JFK assassination. Yes, indeed. It was Hunt to whom Lee Harvey Oswald wrote the cryptic note, asking for more information before he proceeded with the plan. Rothermel was an ex-FBI agent, and as Hunt's chief of security, obviously should have raised some red flags if the dead body of a crucial witness was found on the easement to his property. As far as Rose's death, things got even weirder. And then they ended there too. According to researcher J. Gary Shaw in the book Conspiracy of Silence, the official autopsy of Cheramie has now disappeared. But in the records he discovered that in addition to her other injuries, she had suffered a deep punctate stellate wound above her right forehead. Dateline Dallas, 1993. Shaw researched this type of injury and found out that according to medical textbooks, it often occurs as the result of a contact gunshot wound. When a gun is fired in contact with the flesh, the resultant gases trapped between a layer of skin and the underlying bone can cause a bursting, tearing effect on the surrounding tissue, leaving a star-shaped wound. Punctate stellate means a star-shaped puncture. Okay, stellate, I see that now. Punctate stellate, so a star-shaped puncture wound. So you can imagine that. A puncture wound or an insertion into the skin that produces a star-shaped wound. Whatever the true facts of Cheramie's passage, she certainly does qualify as one of the mysterious deaths that surround the JFK murder. Our research uncovered evidence of a gunshot wound that was far more blatant. Jay Harrison was a member of the Dallas PD, and in the years that followed the JFK assassination, a veteran JFK researcher. He was also a member of that Special Tactical Intelligence Unit, which we covered in the opening chapter on J.D. Tippit. Well, that certainly makes me want to go back and read the first chapter. I am getting into, in my personal reading and personal listening, the J.D. Tippit story a bit more and finding it very fascinating. So at some point, I'm sure we'll revisit some of these other chapters in this book. Again, this is all coming from Richard Belzer's hit list, and I'm finding it very fascinating. I hope you are too. We're down to the last little bit. We'll read. Here is the section about Jay Harrison. Jay was a Dallas police officer and member for a short time assigned to one of these Dallas Special Intel Units, Reserve. And here's the clincher. on the case, folks. Get a load of this little gem. This is from an email in 2012 from that Walt Brown researcher that we heard about earlier. Here is about J. Harrison. Somehow, J. Harrison got the original death certificate, a certified blue copy, and he investigated where it happened, and the address turned out to be Rothermels. The body, if memory serves, had been moved, just as Henry Marshall's body was moved from where he, quote, committed suicide. Left in the street, Melba, that's Rose Cheramie, was run over, but the bullet wound in the forehead was obvious, and the blood stains were on the property. And if that sounds sinister, it darn well should. So here are the conclusions based on evidentiary indications. Victim clearly possessed accurate foreknowledge of the JFK assassination. The fact that the victim was found on the property of the Chief of Security for H.L. Hunt is extremely noteworthy. And the bullet wound in the head and blood on the property are clearly indicative of murder, not accidental death. Conclusion: murder, directly linked to the JFK assassination. So that is chapter 5 of Richard Belzer's hit list. I think you all are going to want to get this book. I'll just look really fast at the table of contents. Again, it starts with J.D. Tippett, Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby. Chapter 5 is Rose Cheramie, called Melba Christine Marcottes. That was her legal name. As I scroll down, I see Dorothy Kilgallen. I see Eddie Benavides, Hank Killam, Gary Underhill, Lee Bowers. We have David Ferry, J. Edgar Hoover, Dr. Mary Sherman. On and on it goes. Sam the Man Giancana. We have George de Mohrenschildt, Jimmy Hoffa, and then it ends, chapter 50, with Senator Robert F. Kennedy. So 50 different mysterious deaths being case by case investigated. And I love the way that they did this because it's not a full, in-depth book about each incident. It is very clarifying to boil the facts down to the relevant details and just take us piece by piece through all the mysterious deaths related to the JFK assassination. I want to point you in the direction of that Rose Cheramie story. Link will be in the comments. I want to point you in the direction of another article that we read by Penn Jones Jr. about some of these mysterious deaths. So if you are interested in more snippets of stories, that's a good place to go. Let me know in the comments what you think of this, what you made of the new information we got about Rose Cheramie. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. I hope you have a great day. Bye.